February 11, 1942. Brest Harbor, occupied France. Captain Sir C. Otto Ciliax stands on the bridge of the battleship Scharnhorst, studying the British reconnaissance photographs that intelligence officers just delivered. The photos show his ship from multiple angles, clear, detailed images taken by RAF Spitfires flying at 30,000 feet. Every gun position visible, every armor plate documented, every potential vulnerability mapped. The British know exactly where he is, have known for months, and they're planning something. Scharnhorst is trapped. She and her sister ship Gneisenau have been bottled up in Brest since March 1941, 11 months of forced inactivity, while the Royal Navy maintains a blockade outside the harbor and RAF Bomber Command drops thousands of tons of explosives trying to sink them at dock. The two battleships represent a significant portion of Germany's surface fleet. Scharnhorst, 38,100 tons fully loaded, 9 11-inch guns, capable of 31.5 knots. Gneisenau. Nearly identical specs, equally dangerous together, they could wreak havoc on Allied Atlantic convoys. Could sink merchant ships faster than America can build them. Could potentially break the British supply lines and starve England into submission, which is exactly why the British want them destroyed. Herr Kapitän, his executive officer, reports, the Führer has sent new orders. We are to break out of Brest and return to German waters. Naval Command believes the British blockade can be run if we move quickly. Ciliax studies the charts. Brest to Germany, roughly 800 miles through the English Channel, the most heavily defended waterway in the world. British radar stations every 20 miles along the coast. RAF bomber bases within striking distance. Royal Navy destroyer flotillas at Portsmouth, Dover, and Harwich. Submarine patrols, minefields, coastal artillery. Running the channel in daylight would be suicide. Running it at night would be slightly less suicidal. What's the proposed timing? Ciliax asks. Departure at 22:45 hours tonight. High-speed transit through the Straits of Dover during daylight. They won't expect us to be that bold. Luftwaffe fighter cover over the narrowest sections. We should reach German waters within 36 hours. It's audacious, reckless. The kind of operation that works in war games but fails catastrophically in reality. But staying in Brest isn't sustainable either. The RAF bombers return every week. Eventually, they'll score a hit that penetrates the armor. Eventually, Scharnhorst will sink at dock like a sitting duck. Better to die fighting in open water than rot in harbor. Inform the crew, Ciliax orders. We sail tonight. But this isn't the story of Scharnhorst's Channel Dash. That Operation Cerberus will succeed spectacularly. Both battleships will reach German waters with minimal damage, humiliating the Royal Navy in the process. This is the story of what happens 18 months later, when one of these ships faces a choice between death and dishonor. December 26, 1943. North Cape, Norway, 1,200 miles north of Germany. Scharnhorst has been ordered to intercept Allied convoy JW-55B, 32 merchant ships carrying war supplies to the Soviet Union through Arctic waters. Intelligence reports the convoy is defended by cruisers and destroyers but no battleships. Easy targets. Scharnhorst's 11-inch guns can outrange British cruisers by miles. Hit them before they can respond. Sink the convoy. Escape into the polar night. Simple plan. Should work perfectly. Except British intelligence knows Scharnhorst is coming. Admiral Bruce Fraser has positioned the battleship HMS Duke of York, 45,000 tons, 10 14-inch guns, in an intercept position north of the convoy. Hidden by weather and radar jamming. Waiting. Scharnhorst approaches the convoy at 12:16 hours. Her radar picks up British cruisers. Range, 28,000 yards. Her guns can reach them. She opens fire. An HMS Duke of York emerges from a snow squall 22,000 yards behind her. Fraser's trap has closed. Scharnhorst is caught between the convoy's cruiser escorts ahead and Duke of York's massive guns astern. She tries to run. Her 31.5-knot speed should let her escape, but British shells score hits, damaging her boilers, reducing speed to 22 knots. Not fast enough. Duke of York closes the range methodically. 20,000 yards, 18,000, 16,000. Her 14-inch guns fire in carefully aimed salvos. Each shell weighs 1,590 pounds and can penetrate 16 inches of armor. Scharnhorst's maximum armor is 14 inches. The German battleship fights back desperately. Her 11-inch guns hit Duke of York twice. Both shells bounce off the British ship's heavy armor without penetrating. But Duke of York's shells don't bounce. They punch through, detonating inside Scharnhorst's hull, killing crew, destroying equipment, setting fires. At 18:20 hours, a 14-inch shell penetrates Scharnhorst's forward turret. The ammunition magazine detonates. The explosion kills 60 men instantly and tears open the forward deck. Scharnhorst is dying, and her crew faces the oldest naval dilemma: surrender or go down with the ship. 18:45 hours, North Cape, sea state, rough, temperature, -18 degrees Celsius. Korvettenkapitän Fritz Hinze, Scharnhorst's executive officer, makes his way through smoke-filled corridors toward the damage control station. The ship is listing 12 degrees to starboard. Water is flooding the forward compartments faster than pumps can handle it. The number 1 turret is gone, just a smoking crater where 500 tons of gun and armor used to be. Fires are raging in 3 separate sections, but the ship is still fighting. The aft turrets, numbers 2 and 3, are still operational, still firing at Duke of York, at the cruisers, at the destroyers closing in for torpedo attacks. Each salvo shakes the dying ship, empty shell casings clattering across tilting decks. Damage report, Hinze shouts over the noise. Forward magazines flooded, pumps 3 and 4 destroyed. We're taking water faster than we can expel it. Estimate 30 minutes before forward draft becomes critical. 30 minutes. Half an hour before Scharnhorst's bow goes under and physics takes over. Once the bow submerges, the stern will rise, the ship will slide under, and 1,900 men will be dumped into Arctic water that kills in 4 minutes. Where's the captain? Forward command post. Last report said he's trapped. The passageway collapsed during the magazine explosion. Captain Sir C. Julius Hinze, no relation to the XO despite the shared surname, is probably dead then, which means command falls to Fritz Hinze, which means the decision falls to him. Fight until the ship sinks and take 1,900 men with her, or surrender and violate every tradition of the Kriegsmarine. Another British salvo hits. This time aft. The shells penetrate the engine room. Boiler number 2 explodes, superheated steam filling the compartment, killing everyone inside instantly. Speed drops from 22 knots to 15, then 10, then 5. Scharnhorst is wallowing now, dead in the water, drifting, still firing her remaining guns but unable to maneuver, unable to escape. British destroyers close in for the kill. Their torpedoes are already in the water, white wakes converging on the crippled battleship from multiple directions. There's no escape, no way to dodge. Scharnhorst is a stationary target. Permission to strike colors, someone shouts. Lower the flag, signal surrender, but Fritz Hinze doesn't respond. He's watching the British destroyers, calculating range and speed. They're 3,000 yards away. Their torpedoes will hit in 90 seconds. Even if he signals surrender now, even if the British see it, the torpedoes are already running. Can't be recalled. And even if they could, surrender means capture, means prison camp, means British intelligence interrogating his crew, extracting information about German naval capabilities, codes, tactics. Every man aboard Scharnhorst knows secrets that could endanger other German ships. But more than that, deeper than tactical considerations, there's the code. The unwritten law that every naval officer learns. You don't surrender your ship while she can still fight. You don't give the enemy a prize. You don't let your vessel be paraded through British ports as a trophy. Better to send her to the bottom than let the enemy take her. Fritz Hinze makes the hardest decision of his life. Open the sea valves, he orders. Scuttle the ship. The damage control officer stares at him. Herr Korvettenkapitän, open the sea valves, flood the lower compartments. We're putting her down ourselves. Now before the British board her. But the crew, abandon ship order goes out immediately. All hands to lifeboats and rafts. We have maybe 5 minutes before she goes under. Move, the order spreads through the ship via the few communication systems still functioning. Abandon ship, not a drill. Sailors pour onto the upper decks. Life jackets are distributed, not enough for everyone, never enough. Lifeboats are lowered, half of them damaged by British shells, unusable. Life rafts deployed. Men jumping directly into the Arctic water because there's no room in the boats. Below decks, engineers open the sea valves, massive inlet ports designed to let seawater flood the ship in controlled circumstances. In this case, the circumstances are anything but controlled. Water rushes in, filling compartments, adding thousands of tons of weight. Scharnhorst's list increases. 15 degrees, 20, 25. The British torpedoes hit at 18:45 hours, 4 of them, striking the port side in quick succession. Each explosion tears open the hull, but it doesn't matter anymore. The ship was already dying from self-inflicted wounds. Scharnhorst capsizes at 18:48 hours. She rolls to port, exposing her massive anti-torpedo bulge and bottom armor. Sailors cling to the hull as it rotates. Some jump clear. Many can't. The ship hangs inverted for almost a minute, a 38,000-ton vessel floating upside down in Arctic seas. Then the air trapped inside escapes, buoyancy fails, and Scharnhorst slides beneath the waves stern first. Time from scuttling order to final sinking, 4 minutes. 1,900 men were aboard when the battle started. 36 survive. 18:55 hours. 7 minutes after the sinking. HMS Duke of York searchlights sweep across the oil-slicked water, illuminating hundreds of German sailors clinging to wreckage, struggling in life jackets, calling for help in voices that are already weakening from hypothermia. Admiral Bruce Fraser stands on Duke of York's bridge, watching the scene through binoculars. He's just won one of the Royal Navy's greatest victories, sinking Germany's most powerful battleship. But victory looks like this. Hundreds of men dying in freezing water, their ship scuttled beneath them, their prospects of survival measured in minutes. Signal to all destroyers, Fraser orders. Commence rescue operations immediately. Pick up every man you can find. His staff officers exchange glances. Rescuing enemy sailors isn't standard procedure. The U-boat threat is real. German submarines could be converging on this position right now, attracted by radio traffic and the battle's sound. Stopping to pick up survivors makes British ships vulnerable, stationary targets. Sir, his flag captain says carefully, the U-boat risk is acceptable, Fraser interrupts. Those men fought bravely. They're sailors like us. We're not leaving them to freeze. 4 British destroyers, Scorpion, Stord, Matchless, and Musketeer, maneuver through the debris field. Searchlights sweep the water. Sailors throw lines, lower nets, extend poles to men who can still grab them. But Arctic water at -18 degrees is merciless. Human survival time, 3 to 4 minutes before hypothermia causes loss of consciousness, maybe 10 minutes before death. And most of the German sailors have already been in the water for 10 minutes. Ordinary seaman Thomas Wilson, aboard HMS Scorpion, helps pull a German sailor from the water. The man is barely conscious, his lips blue, his hands too numb to grip the rescue line. Wilson and 2 other sailors haul him aboard, strip off his frozen clothes, wrap him in blankets. He's alive, the ship's doctor confirms. Barely. Core temperature is critically low. He needs warming immediately. They carry him below to the engine room, the warmest part of the ship, lay him next to the boilers. Two other survivors are already there, unconscious but breathing. Wilson returns to the deck to help rescue more, but the numbers are grim. For every man they pull from the water alive, they find 5 floating face down. Dead, frozen, gone. By 1930 hours, 35 minutes after the sinking, the destroyers have picked up 36 survivors. No more living men can be found. The searchlights sweep across hundreds of bodies floating in the oil slick. 1864 German sailors who went down with Scharnhorst or died in the water afterward. The largest loss of life from a single ship sinking in Royal Navy history. Yes, they were the enemy, but they were also sailors, men who followed orders, men who fought for their country. Admiral Fraser orders the destroyers to withdraw. The rescue operation is over. The dead will remain at North Cape, 1,200 miles from home, in water too deep for recovery. As Duke of York turned south toward Scapa Flow, Fraser writes in his action report, "The Scharnhorst fought to the end with the greatest gallantry and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The conduct of her commanding officer and ship's company was in accordance with the highest traditions of any naval service. We did our utmost to save life, but the cruel sea claimed the majority." Later, years later, after the war, Fraser will write a more personal assessment that becomes famous in naval history circles. The scuttling of the Scharnhorst by her own crew, rather than allowing her capture, was perhaps the most merciful act. It spared her men the humiliation of surrender and ensured she died fighting rather than as a prize of war. I cannot condemn such a decision. Any captain facing the same circumstances might have done the same. It's an extraordinary statement, a British admiral praising an enemy crew for destroying their own ship. But Fraser understands something that transcends national loyalty, the code of the sea, the brotherhood of sailors who face the same dangers regardless of which flag they serve. Scharnhorst fought well. When defeat was certain and capture imminent, her crew chose death over dishonor. From one sailor to another, enemy or not, that deserves respect. Not all of Fraser's contemporaries agree. Some British officers think he's being too generous to the enemy, too sympathetic to men who served Nazi Germany, but Fraser stands by his assessment. War is brutal, but some acts of defiance earn recognition even from the opposition. Scuttling Scharnhorst was one of them. January 3, 1944. Prisoner of war camp, Scotland. 8 days after the sinking. Matrosengevaarder Wilhelm Gerdeck sits in an interrogation room at the British POW facility, trying to explain to intelligence officers why his ship had to die. He's 22 years old, a junior sailor, turret loader for the No. 3 gun. He survived because he was on deck trying to reach a lifeboat when Scharnhorst capsized, got thrown clear, grabbed floating debris, was pulled from the water by HMS Scorpion after 8 minutes in Arctic water, lost 3 toes to frostbite but kept his life. Now the British want information, ship specifications, armor thickness, gun ranges, crew size, command structure, everything that might help them sink other German warships. Gerdeck tells them nothing classified, gives only information that's already public or obvious. "Why did your crew scuttle the ship?" the interrogator asks. "You were already sinking. The British torpedoes guaranteed that." "The Korvettenkapitein didn't want you to have her," Gerdeck replies. "Better to send her down ourselves than let the Royal Navy board her, take her secrets, parade her through British ports. That's pride, not strategy. Pride is strategy. You're sailors, you understand. Would you want HMS Duke of York captured by the Kriegsmarine, put on display in Hamburg, used for German propaganda films?" The interrogator doesn't answer. Doesn't need to. They both know the answer. Another survivor, Oberbootsman Heinrich Kuhlmann, 34 years old, 15 years in the Navy, provides more detail in his interrogation. "The order came from the XO. Open the sea valves. Abandon ship. We knew what it meant. Some men refused, said they'd rather fight to the end, go down with the guns still firing. But most of us followed orders, got to the upper deck. The ship was already rolling when the torpedoes hit. Did you see the Captain, Captain Hinsey? No, we heard he died in the first magazine explosion. Forward command post collapsed. He never made it out. So the executive officer ordered the scuttling. Yes, Corvettenkapitän Hinsey. He chose to sink the ship rather than surrender her. Some men called him a murderer. Said he killed 1,900 sailors to avoid capture. Others said he was a hero, saved us from the dishonor of surrender. What do you think? Kuhlman is silent for a long moment. I think he made the only choice he could. We were dead anyway. The British had us. We couldn't run, couldn't fight effectively. Either we drowned as British prisoners or drowned as German sailors. He chose the latter. I can't say if it was right, but I understand it. The British interrogators compile the testimonies. 36 survivors, 36 slightly different versions of the same story. But the core facts are consistent. *1. Scharnhorst was fatally damaged by 1845 hours, taking water, no propulsion, unable to maneuver. 2. The Captain was already dead or incapacitated. Command fell to the XO. 3. The XO ordered sea valves opened and abandoned ship procedures initiated. 4. The ship was scuttled deliberately, 4 minutes before final sinking. 5. British torpedoes hit the ship during the scuttling process but were not the primary cause of sinking. The conclusion: Scharnhorst was killed by her own crew to prevent capture. The Royal Navy's official report notes this but doesn't dwell on it. Politically, it's better to say British forces sank the German battleship Scharnhorst than German crews scuttled their ship to avoid capture. The former is a clear victory. The latter is complicated. But Admiral Fraser knows the truth. He was there. He watched it happen. He ordered the rescue effort that saved 36 men, and he respects the decision. They fought well, Fraser tells his staff officers. When capture was inevitable, they denied us the prize. I would have done the same in their position. Any officer would. Some might call it wasteful, sir. All those lives lost rather than surrendering. Some might, Fraser agrees. But those people have never commanded a warship, never faced the choice between surrender and scuttling. It's easy to judge from shore. It's different when you're on the bridge watching your ship die. He pauses, looking at the intelligence reports spread across his desk. Testimonies from German survivors, damage assessments, casualty figures. The Scharnhorst went down fighting, Fraser says finally. Her crew chose death over dishonor. That's not wasteful. That's naval tradition. That's the code every sailor understands, regardless of which flag they serve. Will you include that in your official report, sir? Fraser considers, then nods. Yes, history should know they died well. May 8, 1945. The war in Europe ends. Germany surrenders. The Kriegsmarine surface fleet, what's left of it, is divided among Allied powers as war prizes. Ships that survived are claimed by Britain, America, Soviet Union, France. Some are commissioned into Allied navies. Others are used as target practice. Most are eventually scrapped. But Scharnhorst isn't among them. She's 1,200 miles north of Norway, 950 feet below the surface, resting on the Arctic seafloor. Intact, undisturbed. A tomb for 1864 men who chose to go down with her rather than surrender. The wreck is discovered in September 2000 by Norwegian naval historians using side-scan sonar. The images show a massive hull lying upright on the bottom, turrets still attached, hull largely intact despite torpedo damage. Divers photographed the wreck in 2001. The images are haunting. Gun barrels still elevated in firing position. Armor belts showing impact craters from British shells. The crater where the forward magazine exploded. Life raft davits empty, deployed during the final minutes. And everywhere debris. Personal effects, equipment. The scattered remains of a warship that died fighting. The Norwegian government declares Scharnhorst a war grave. No salvage. No artifact recovery. No disturbance of the site. The 1864 men who died with the ship will rest undisturbed. Admiral Fraser's assessment. That the scuttling was the most merciful act becomes more controversial as historians examine it. Critics argue, the scuttling killed 1864 men unnecessarily. If the crew had surrendered immediately, British ships could have rescued hundreds before hypothermia set in. The decision to scuttle was pride, not mercy. It prioritized naval tradition over human life. Defenders counter, Scharnhorst was sinking anyway from British damage. The scuttling only accelerated the inevitable by minutes. In Arctic water at -18 degrees, survival time is 4 minutes regardless. Surrender wouldn't have saved significantly more lives, and it would have required German sailors to betray their oaths, surrender their ship, give the enemy intelligence and propaganda value. The truth is probably somewhere between. Fritz Hinze, the XO who ordered the scuttling, didn't survive. He went down with the ship, either by choice or because there was no time to escape. His motivations died with him. We can only infer from the circumstances and from what survivors remember. What we know. Scharnhorst was fatally damaged by 1845 hours. She would have sunk within 15 to 20 minutes regardless of scuttling. Arctic water kills in 4 minutes. Only 36 of 1,900 survived. The scuttling ensured the ship sank on German terms. Not British. Was it merciful? Depends on your definition. Merciful to the ship, yes. She died fighting under her own power, denying the enemy a prize. Merciful to the crew, debatable. Most would have died anyway. But some, those who might have survived if rescue came faster, died because scuttling accelerated the sinking. Merciful compared to alternatives, probably. The alternative was surrender, interrogation, prison camps, and the knowledge that their ship was captured. For career naval officers raised in the tradition of death before dishonor, that might have been worse than drowning. Admiral Fraser's statement remains the definitive assessment from the British perspective. He could have condemned the scuttling, could have called it wasteful, prideful, a war crime of sorts, killing your own men to avoid capture. But he didn't. He recognized it as a decision made by sailors following the code of the sea. That recognition, enemy admiral to enemy crew, is perhaps the highest honor the Scharnhorst sailors could receive. They fought well. When defeat was certain, they chose their own ending rather than accepting the enemy's terms. From one sailor to another, that deserves respect. Today, Scharnhorst rests at North Cape, a war grave marked on naval charts as a hazard to navigation. 1864 men entombed in steel at 950 feet depth. No flags mark the site. No memorials. Just coordinates. 72 degrees 16 and 28 degrees 41 E. But naval historians know the location. Divers have photographed the wreck. And every December 26th, German and British naval veterans gather to remember the battle. They remember the men who fought, the 36 who survived, the 1864 who didn't, and they remember Admiral Fraser's words, perhaps the most merciful act, not because the scuttling was kind or gentle or saved lives, but because it allowed men to die as they chose, on their own terms, following their own code, refusing surrender until the very end. In the brutal calculus of naval warfare, sometimes that's the only mercy available.